a passionate instigator and dynamic problem solver. Dr. Kevin Ross Emery, the host of the Dr. Kevin Radio Show, will be taking you outside the box, behind the curtain, and identifying the load of BS we are fed every day. And now, Dr. Kevin.
Hello, 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 and welcome to the Dr. Kevin Show here on OMTimes. So, first of all, I'd like to remind everybody that this is my call-in show. So you're welcome to call in at 202-570-7057. If you would like to ask a question, make a comment of either me or my guest. We are waiting for my guest to still call in, so I'm going to be going ahead and getting tonight's show underway. And as soon as we find out if there's just been a technical difficulty and we're still going to have tonight's guest, that we will introduce him at that time. If not, and you have tuned in for tonight's guest, his contact information is still going to be on the posting for the Dr. Kevin Show. And you can come to the Dr. Kevin Show at facebook.com/the Dr. Kevin Show. Actually, you know what? I am going to tell you that we had scheduled tonight Ashkan Emami, who started a law firm after being diagnosed with cancer, and hear about how his diagnosis led to the story of perseverance and a passion for his clients. In my own personal poking around, I know that he has represented thousands of creatives, entrepreneurs, and investors in immigration matters. And of course, immigration is a hot topic these days. But there are a lot of hot topics these days. And since I like to talk about hot topics, we're going to throw a few hot topics out right now. We're going to talk about them. And again, you can call in at 202-570-7057. Be part of tonight's conversation. Or, you know, and we can see if tonight's guest is just, you know, sometimes stuff happens, and find out what went on. So, January 6th committee. Now they have officially decided that they are going to subpoena the former president, old Donald JJ, and see if he'll come in and answer some questions. And, you know, I want to start by the fact that we have, first of all, we know what the end game is. It's very clear. The end game here is to wait the clock out, hope that the House of Representatives goes Republican. Then the Republicans will dismantle this because they want this in the rearview mirror, because too many of them have too many sensitive body parts hanging out the window that didn't have the cojones to stand up when Trump was pulling all of his shit show, let's overthrow the government insurrection bullshit with a bunch of semi-delusional people with weapons and guns attacking police officers. Yay, GOP, that's the party of the police officer. Yeah, we're such the party of the police officer. We send our people in to beat them up when they don't agree with us. Yeah, that's us. Yeah, that's GOP. Because they are, some of them are addicted. I actually heard an interview earlier today, with Sheila, who was the deputy press secretary under Kaylee, the last press secretary that Trump had at the end of his administration. She was the deputy secretary. And she said the scary part is, from being part of the inner circle, that there were a lot of people that knew that Trump had made up all the election stuff, that the election, he hadn't really lost the election, that he was playing a game, and if he could basically rig the system, play the system, which, I mean, who is surprised here? Can anybody honestly get on the phone right now, 202-570-7057, and tell me that they're really surprised that a man who has been gaming the system since, since he dodged the draft, he's been gaming the system, that he would go in as a president that tried to game the system. Like, this is not rocket science, girls. This is an obvious, of course, this is what he's going to do. He's going to try to game the system. He's going to try to shake everybody up, keep everybody off balance, keep repeating lies until some people hypnotically believe that they are truth. The sad question is, how many of them does he believe it's truth? But that there were people in that inner circle that believed it. A majority did not and knew that he was trying to game the system, but at that point really had to go along with the game unless they wanted to kiss their political careers goodbye. The fact that the GOP has let one man have so much power, such a cult, is just mind-blowing. But she was honest, she was talking about it. She goes, a lot of people knew it wasn't true. And they felt like his was still, they didn't want to get on the wrong side of him. They didn't want to get on, didn't want his wrath, that would blow his political career. Besides, there wasn't necessarily anything in it for them to not go along with him, because they're all leaving the White House unless he figured out a way to game the system and stay. Can't game the system and try to overthrow it, but make it look American. Really, really good at that. So now we know the long game is he's not going to answer this subpoena. Now he's got to go next week. We're going to see what he's going to do now. I don't know. I don't know. It's old Donald JJ. You can never tell what he's going to do. Donnie Boy there, he's probably going to, he's going to figure out a way, because he is supposed to be testifying. He is on the hot seat for the Jean Carroll thing next week. And all of his appeals, it says, no, you have no reason to not have to come and in a court of law under oath. And we know that his favorite number is the 5th, but I don't know if he's going to be able to get away with it. I mean, there's going to be a decision of whether he's guilty or not. So he can 5th is all he wants, but is that not going to work against him, that he has actually defamed this woman when he said that he didn't even know who she was? When I think that there's some pretty significant evidence that he didn't know who she was. But I mean, you know what? This is the game. This is the game that the withering party that is predominantly being run by racist and angry old white men who have become almost politically impotent, have to play to stay in power, because the majority of Americans don't vote for them, right? They're losing their steam, so they have to game the system. I mean, every time something falls out of one of these, angry old white supremacist, male toxic, and some of them can have pretty colors painted on their faces. They can get that this is a way that they can game the system and play it, and maybe get a couple of free rides out of it, lifetime benefits if they make it into the Senate. Our boy Herschel there, I didn't even know who she was. Oh yeah, that's right. She has a child of mine and I've been paying child support. No, I didn't know who she was. No, I never would have. I would have condoned and paid for her to have an abortion. Oh yeah, no. Oh yeah. Well, there was that cash check. Well, no, ignore that. I've been saved. Really? So we know what the end game is here. Try to get the Republicans in who are going to try to save themselves for the House of Reps, which is where I really hope that if your number one priority is keeping America a democracy, for this one time, vote Democrat. Maybe you don't like their policies, maybe you don't like Biden, maybe Camilla gets under your skin, I don't care who you don't like. Do you like the country? Because the country is at risk. Because if they can get Donald JJ in, which I don't know, can you run for office if you're actually behind bars? I've heard both that, he hasn't done anything, that even if he gets, the word is there, boys and girls. Feel free to call in at 202-570-7057 and give me the word. We're still hoping that we might be hearing from tonight's guest. But even if he is guilty, even if he's declared guilty, that would not stop him from running for president again. Of course, if we manage to keep the democracy a democracy by just making sure the Democrats keep the House and the Senate for 2 more years, that we can usher out the age of the Trump tramps. The Trump tramps. There's Trump, and then there's the tramps like DeSantis and Abbott and Johnson, all the Trump and the Trump tramps. Maybe they could start a musical group and tour Russia. I'm sure they'd be welcome over there. Hungary would be hungry to have them, I'm sure. They'd fit right in, as long as they were all at the top of the oligarchy heap. But he's got to show up for the trial next week. We're going to see what he's going to do. I don't know. Bump off another wife. See if he can fake a hurricane with a white marker on a board and figure out a way to, go on Truth Not Social and convince everybody that a hurricane is hitting and he has to be at Mar-a-Lago where he's figuring out the place to hide the rest of the documents he didn't turn over, so he can't show up for it. I don't know. Something's going to happen. Maybe the dog will eat his homework. I mean, he's done everything else. I don't know. Maybe he'll decide it's worth knocking off one of his own kids if he thinks he can get out of it at a grief factor. At this point, I wouldn't put anything past the man. Lies right to your face over and over again, telling a different lie that basically points out that the last thing he said about it was a lie, and then tells his people, this is what you want, this is what they want you to believe. They're misquoting me. I love that when I have those conversations with the still drinking the Kool-Aid wackadoodles that are still defending that he should be president now, despite all the evidence. You're wackadoodle. Sorry. I get it. It's a cult. It's akin to a mental illness. That there's, I'm sure that there is some kind of diagnosis in the DSM for it, because there's a diagnosis for anything in the DSM, these days. Oh, look, you have a hangnail. We have 5 different medications that you'll be hooked on for life that we can give you for that hangnail so you won't feel the pain. Yeah, DSMV, American Psychiatric Association, pharmaceuticals, they've got you covered from now till death. And they'll keep you alive as long as they can. Really, they will, because they get to still sell you medications, even if you have no quality of life. But, they don't care. Hey, it's been a year. All the billionaires made billions more. So, the end game. Let me get my GOP people in there. We'll dismember this panel 6 house. We'll make up all sorts of crazy shit. Now, are there some real stories there? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure. We have these people jumping and making untrue statements to try to lead you that something has already happened, which hasn't happened. I haven't really got the truth on where the Hunter Biden stuff is, and I don't really know. This is where I want to text Matt and say, hey, Matt, can you hop on the show for a few minutes? Because he's probably got the latest and greatest. For those of you who don't recognize the name, Matt Connerton is going to be the first Thursday of every month as we talk about politics. but I did read that it was actually not a true statement that they were getting ready to indict or do whatever with Hunter, that was taken out of context, wasn't true, but was put out there so it could be in the rumor mill of conversation to distort away from the truth. That it just wasn't true. But that's part of the problem today. We don't know what's true and what's not true. We don't know what we can believe or who to believe. But, one of the things is when I listen to multiple sources who taped a speech and I listen to the words of the speech, I don't really think that there is a large enough conspiracy theory or enough money you could pay to keep enough people's mouths shut that would have to be involved to say that somehow they doctored a half a dozen tapes of some of the things that old Donald JJ has been saying or has said that was clearly a lie. That was clearly not a truth. And then when it gets pointed out it's not a truth, he doubles in more. But at the end of the day, then he says, then I hear from the wackadoodles, oh, well, it was changed, they doctored the tape. Or when Ivanka says something against her father, oh, no, it was not Ivanka. It was a stand-in made to look like her. It was a holograph. I can't make this shit up. That's what some of the people that are being interviewed that are the wackadoodle supporters of the Donald still president, Biden who club. Of course, I'd love to tell them all, you know what? I think that right at the end of 2024, we should all get together and decide that Donald really was the president for the last 4 years, and it wasn't JoJo. You know why? Because that means he couldn't run again, because he would have had 2 terms. So that would be one way to deal with it, right? Just agree with them all at the very last minute, and then of course, Donald JJ can't run again. He can't get a 3rd term. So he was looking into changing it, is the rumor on the street. And I will say, rumor on the street. I've not read enough stuff to verify that was a tried true statement heard by enough people that it can be verified. But let's face it, the nature of the child, that would be something he would inquire. So what would it take to have me be able to do a 3rd term? He's a wannabe Putin who just, uses the military and his power to change the game to always game for him and make sure that he always gets reelected, even when he was supposed to be elected out, like he wasn't supposed to stay that long. This is Donald JJ's idol. And we'll be right back here on the Dr. Kevin Show.
Conscious media for conscious minds. OMTimes. Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from New Thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
You came across someone struggling with hunger. How would you recognize them? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break
because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time landing a job
and getting back on his feet?
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hello, and welcome back to the Dr. Kevin Show here on OMTimes. This show is a live call-in show, as it's always a live call-in show. And you can call in at 202-570-7057. That's 202-570-7057. I am assuming that for whatever reason, the guest that we had scheduled for tonight, our wires got crossed. I've not been able to contact him. So it's just going to be 2 more segments of Wild and Woolly with Dr. Kevin, which means if you are out there and listening and wish to call in with any kind of questions or comments or any place that you would like to see us talk about, please feel free to do so. That's 202-570-7057. I'm thinking that we may have run the gambit on politics, though I could easily spend the whole hour of the show talking about all of the different things, even if I never mentioned, Donnie JJ again, which would be such a pleasure to never have to mention Donnie JJ again, that there's still a lot of other political shenanigans and things going on out there, but people don't, people tune in the first Thursday of the month to listen to Matt and I talk about politics, but then they come here for other, they come here for more than just politics. This is not the major thrust of the Dr. Kevin Show. So what I'd like to talk about now is actually something I'm going to change, though I'm open to any questions or comments that come in. But I want to talk a little bit about the shift and the change going on in the religions of America. So Christianity in the overall is kind of sort of on a downward spiral. There are more people leaving the church than joining it. There are people that are becoming less affiliated with churches. They may still identify as Christians, but if they do, they're private, and it's unaffiliated. The last statistic I saw was that unaffiliates are growing. People are getting more upset with churches that seem to be more interested in having power through politics, power through media, to push forward agendas, which really are not Christian agendas in nature. It's somehow really not Christian in nature to be promoting racism, bigotry, to go after immigrants, to not help the needy and the poor. And there are so many ways in this 2022 where the more and more access to information and the more questions that are asked that can't be answered, and the less ignorant people are choosing to be. And when I say ignorant, I'm talking about ignorance. It's kind of also to be about not having access to. If you're raised in a spiritually abusive church, and there are several Christian sects that would easily qualify for cults and are out there acting as a cult, and that are spiritually abusive to large swaths of their membership, whether they realize it or not. And, but people are starting to see all of the documented times the Bible has been rewritten, that it wasn't until the middle of, the 20th century that the word homosexual even appeared in the Bible. It wasn't there. It wasn't God that said it. This from day one has been an interpretation of man speaking in a language that man could comprehend. I want people to understand that we have the major religion influencing this country, that they're taking large swaths of it for stuff that was said by humanity in infancy to humanity in infancy, that was said by infants to other infants to try to get them to not kill each other, to band together, to figure out tribes and communities, to have something to give them hope, to give them a reason to keep going, to come together. And early man reacted a lot to fear. Make them fearful. Give them these little pointy-eared goblins and devils, and give them these fiery brimstone eternity in hells if they didn't act in a prescribed and set way. That was written in a language that I comfortably say, if one person in my listening audience could actually tell me that they could read and translate the original books of the Bible in the original language that they were written in, and have their hands get on a copy, that they themselves could do that, I would be flabbergasted. So we know the game telephone. How many people out there remember the game of telephone that you played as a kid? You would whisper something in the person's ear next to you in the circle, and you'd say it as fast as you could. Then they would turn and they would whisper to the person as fast as they could. And then it would go all the way around, and at the end, the last person would have to say what they were told. And then the first person would say what they said. And of course, it was a hysterical game that was supposed to prove a point about repeating things and gossiping, kind of. I probably didn't use that word, but they might have. But yeah, no. Especially not for younger kids. But it was kind of like, people don't always hear what you say. People don't always repeat exactly what they heard, that everything goes through a filter. And we accept that truth. We accept that the more further away you are from the horse's mouth, the closer you are to being a horse's ass when you're repeating something. Did you get that? The closer you are from the horse's mouth, the closer you are to the horse's ass when you're repeating something that you heard, that somebody told you, that heard from somebody else, that heard from somebody else, that's what was said. Right? Not admissible in a court of law. Called hearsay. So, let's face it, the Bible's hearsay. It was repeated and rewritten, and it was rewritten to reflect each generation that rewrote it, that took it on, that came out with a different version of it, that had a different emphasis on what was important and what was unimportant. And I always remember this story. I was down at the Edgar Cayce Institute in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And when I was down there, and this late 80s, early 90s, that I was there, and I was just visiting. And one of the things that would happen is that people would just come in and sit down in this big, huge, like outer hall room where people could just kind of meet and stuff. It wasn't official classes. Wasn't anything that you paid a ticket for. It wasn't, whatever. And there was this guy who was some spiritual holy man, whatever, from India that was visiting. And he was in ARE, Association for Research and Enlightenment. That's the official name of the Edgar Cayce Institute, Association for Research and Enlightenment. And he was there. And he was talking about that in India, they have records where when the Catholics were debating who they wanted to be, were they going to believe in the Trinity? Were they going to believe what was the actual nature of Christ and the nature of the resurrection? And when it was debated by men at Catholic congresses, where there would be raging debates, and then a decision would come down of what the church and the Pope of the time decided was in the best interest of the church. Not in all that was holy, but in the church. And that they all sent scribes because, India has a much older established set of religions. And they went and that you can go into places in India and access the actual transcriptions of what was being said at some of these things, and what were the arguments, and what were the back and forth. And then there were bloody wars within the church, within countries, within each other, that would happen once they made a decision that this is the way we were going to go, and everybody was going to do it. And if you didn't do it, then you were a heretic, and you got. But it was a decision made by a council of men. A council of men decided what should be kept in the Bible, what should be taken out, how things should be declared. This was done by a council of men. And now let's come back to today. We are sitting here in a country that still, a lot of people, we have people in our government who have never read the Constitution or are familiar with the laws of the land, but yet there are representatives. I do think that you should have to pass the same test that immigrants have to pass to become a citizen. I think if you're going to run for office, I think that there should be a test that you have to pass. And if you can't pass a basic test of what it is to be an American, that's well established, that we make people take in order to become American citizens. If you can't pass it, you should be immediately nullified from being in office. And there are several people right now that I will guarantee you that are in our House of Representatives and some in our Senate that could not pass that if their life depended on it. And you could tell by the stupidity of what they say. But that want to make this a theocracy, that want to make that this is a Christian nation. But who's Christian? Which Christ? Because they ain't all alike. And some have become more enlightened. Some have said, look, this is a book of guidance that we are supposed to learn and grow and evolve from, which is more how Judaism, part of Judaism, Judaism, the Abrahamic religions know before you go on and start saying horrible things about the Jews, that Christianity wouldn't exist without them. Oops. Okay? That you that they are more enlightened. They condone gay marriage. They support it. They'll do them. That's their choice. If that's your flavor. But there are a number of flavors of Christianity, and as always, the loudest, the squeakiest, are the craziest, the most fundamentals, the zealots, as Papa used to always say to me, the real nutcases, Kevin. There are just some real nutcases out there, and you just avoid them and ignore them as best as possible. But now that those nutcases are in the place where they can affect our laws, they can make our lives untenable, they can force women into the slavery of having to keep a child that they don't want, that is or is medically dangerous for them to keep, or was created in an unwilling act of violence, right? There's nothing Christian about that. But the Christian religion is actually on the decline. Not that it's necessarily being replaced by any of the other religions. It's not like we're going to become a nation of Muslims or Hindus or Buddhists or pagans, but it is on the decline. And Christianity is not a single solid faith. It is a splintered, flawed faith that covers the gambit from those that live and role model by the principles of Jesus, for which I have no problem, because Jesus never told you to convert by a sword or force your will on other people, right? He was the one that talked about love and acceptance and all that stuff and all that jazz. No. These are nutcases in power that twist Christianity to be a perfect representation of what every Christian scholar will tell you what was prophesied when Satan was busy taking over and ruling Christianity by the perversion of Christianity. And that's who these people are. And they yell Christian the loudest, the strongest, and make the largest mockery out of it while they're doing it in the name of Jesus or the name of God. And they need to be called out. And basically, if there is any kind of unified Christianity, they need to throw them out, because they are not acting in any kind of Christian ideas or values. But Christianity is ever so slightly on the decline. There are people who are unaffiliating with churches that are walking away. They may not be affiliating with else. They may be creating a private relationship where they still feel like they're a Christian, that Jesus is their Savior or their way. And I say, good on them. Fabulous. You found your God makes you happy. You found your way makes you happy. Your way has the way to accept other people, that they are allowed to have their way, that they don't have to agree with you, that you don't have to enslave them in any number of different ways in which we enslave people in the 21st century through education and poverty and laws. But Christianity is on the decline as far as the affiliation. And people are looking for more non-denominational. And they may or may not have that Christian core. As all of you, my listeners that have listened for any length of time know, I'm a Unitarian Universalist. I live by the seventh principles. In the next 12 to 18 months, we may have an eighth principle that was agreed to. We love the Christian people who are part of the UU as much as we love the Jewish people who are part of the UU and the pagans. And we love them all, as long as they stay in covenant and in relationship with everybody else and the seven principles. And on that note, we'll be right back here on the Dr. Kevin Show.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Vox Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Furman. Join me every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio for Vox Novus, the new voice.
If I could be you,
and you could be me,
for just 1 hour.
If you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Hello, 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 and welcome back to the last segment of the Dr. Kevin Show here on OMTimes. Remember, we are a live call-in show, and you can call in at 202-570-7057, 202-570-7057. I have been asked, I've talked many times about the principles on a couple of different shows, so I am going to go through and share the 7 established principles, and then there's an 8th principle, which has not been adopted by everybody, but has been adopted by some churches already, but there may be some language changes before it gets adopted officially, but it's looking like it's going to. So I'm just going to do a quick rundown for people. And as I'm saying these, I want you to go, is that something I could get behind on? Is that something that I think is a way that I am or would like to be in the world, and that I would like to be with people who do the best they can to live their life based on these principles. The inherent worth and dignity of every person, 1. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, 2. Acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregation, 3. A free and responsible search for the truth and meaning, 4. The right of conscience and the use of democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. 5. That was 5. I'm through the number after. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all is 6. Respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are part. That's 7. And for those with all those words, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part, that means taking care of the planet and everything on it and everything in it, and stop being such dickheads to the world and all the other animals. Of course, that's not how the UUs are going to say it. So I am UU. And then the 8th one, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. I'm going to repeat that one more time. Journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. So those are the 7 principles that are part of the UUA, Unitarian Universalist Association. You are likely to have a UU church somewhere near you. If you don't, there are several of them that now do all their services with an online component, so you could always tune in if you feel like you can be as spiritually satisfied and accountable in your PJs watching it, you know, on a computer screen or projected up on a TV screen like some of us, you know, when we want to have the full effect. Though I will always say, and it varies very much, I think that was redundant. It varies a lot from church to church, how much is more social justice, to how much of it is more humanist, to how much of it is more spiritual. You can find all of that under the UU umbrella, but different congregations tend to have the forefront of one more than the other. You know, like there's only so many things you can shove in an hour, in a day, in a thing, and the people that come together. And I know people that will travel to a UU church that might be 1 or 2 towns over instead of the UU church in their town, because it's just a better match at where they are and where their priority in their life is. Some have a lot of active, you know, Sunday schools and even schools that are based on that are just like any other religious, you know, private school that teaches education for, you know, grades K through 12. But, you know, so again, there may be a priority or there may be a change. It is definitely not you're going to go and find the exact same experience, or I'm not going to say exact, but pretty darn close exact same experience no matter what UU church you go into. They probably have, of all the religions I've ever have knowledge of or experienced, probably have the greatest diversity from individual church to individual church, and that even changes based on the changing needs of the congregation that it's there. So the congregation is very much involved in that shift and change. So, you know, it's not forced on you. You're part of the creator of it, which is something that also appeals to me. So I know that I had people that have asked me about the principles. This was a great show to bring them all out again. I know I've said some of them in the past, but since we've had some kind of technical snafu and the guest wasn't here tonight, I figure this is a good time to do it. The other thing, because there was a time period here on the Dr. Kevin Show where I would run on the 5th Thursday of every 5th Thursday that there was during the year, because there's, you know, always, you know, depending on the calendar, you always end up with a 5th different day on different months. And on the 5th Thursday, I'd always do a poetry corner, and I was trying to get other poets to come in and, you know, share their poetry. But it's something that just seemed to slide away, and it slid in and it slid away. I've put out poetry corners. I've just had a new book out. Thoughts at 4 a.m. came out 3, 4, 5 weeks ago. I'm constantly writing new pieces. Sometimes I'll write a new piece on a show and somebody will get in touch with me and go, which book is that in? I'm like, that will be in a book that gets released next year or the year after, because I've got 4 or 5 poetry books out. I have at least three times, if not 4 times, more poems that have yet to be released in collections and out than I already have out. Yep, 3, 4 times at least. So it's always a matter of getting stuff out there and sharing it. But again, my latest collection is called Thoughts at 4 a.m. And you can go to weboflight.com, mydrkevin.com. You can go to Amazon and put in Dr. Kevin Ross Emery or Kevin Ross Emery, and whatever you may, in any of those places, and you can find on your, where you can find, well, all my books. I think I have 24 books out. But you can find all those poetry books there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a couple of poems. One of these, so this poem is from Thoughts from a Renaissance Man. I'm actually going to read a poem that if you say you like it, you could go get the book, have all the other poetry around it. And again, you can do that on Amazon.com. Thoughts from a Renaissance Man by Kevin Ross Emery. This is actually, I won an award for this poem. And I think it was my Poet of the Year award I won in a national poetry contest that they may still run it. I haven't entered anything for years, but I have different poems that have won different things. I'm pretty sure this is the one that either I won the Golden Award or I'm pretty sure it was Poet of the Year award. I can't remember. It was 30 odd years ago that I won an award for this poem. So yeah, I don't remember which one. I had like 5-6 years in a row. Every year I won a different award for a poem, for one of the poems I submitted. Life. I watched a new leaf break from a tree. Then I saw the new leaf whiffed by the wind across the sky, and I watched the rain batter it to the ground. Looking at the leaf, I cried. But wiping my eyes, I chose to ride the wind and feel the rain, for it was better than dying on a branch. So again, that is called Life. It was one of the pieces I did win an award for. And it is in a collection called Thoughts from a Renaissance Man. That's Thoughts from a Renaissance Man. I'm going to share one more from there. And I'm going to do one that's one of the poems I wrote that's a tribute to my father, called Papa's Hands. Your hands held me when I was still small enough to be held by two hands. Firm and fleshy hands, knuckles of a boxer, heart of a father, those are Papa's hands. Hands that sponged my brow when high fevers grasped me. Death threatened me, but you fought and won me. Hands that lifted me until I was too big, with arms that hugged me, for which you are never too old. Hands that grasped my shoulders and held me when the world turned against me. Those were Papa's hands. Papa's hands that landscaped the beauty and built the fences. Tough hands, full of love. Full of love, full of compassion and beauty. Life has been full for me, helped with Papa's hands. So I know that we are going to probably not have time enough for me to read one more. And I don't want to cut you off in the middle. Or maybe I should. Maybe that would make you go out and buy the book. Who knows? But again, that's called Papa's Hands. It's in Thoughts from a Renaissance Man. I'm trying to see if I can find something that's kind of small, a quick little, because I've got a few quick little ditties. If I can find one in this one. Rain. Wandering in the rain, I feel it upon my skin as it seeps through my clothes and care not what I wear. It is most important that feet inhale it, smell it, taste it, absorb it, for it reminds me that I love. Actually, it says it reminds me that I live. And I said, I wonder if I should rewrite it. Well, it's in the book. Thank you so much for this week and sharing me on one of my ranting shows, as my guest didn't show up. Next week, we will have on Rob Stewart from Inner Astrology. innerastrology.com, I think. Innerastrology.org, I know still goes there. But Rob Stewart will be on with Planetary Influences next week here on the Dr. Kevin Show.